They said, "She's never done complex surgery." Said it like a verdict, like the final word on what you're allowed to be in this world. But what happens when the person they've been ignoring is the only one who can stop the bleeding? The fluorescent lights in a St. Louis trauma center hum like a warning you stop hearing after a while. A nurse scrolls orders with tired eyes. A resident rehearses confidence he hasn't earned. In the supply corridor, Dr. Lila Morgan counts suture kits no one will use, swallowing every instinct that begs her to step in. Because visibility is dangerous. Because some skills come with memories that don't let you sleep. Tonight, that hospital will learn the cost of underestimating the quiet one. Stay with me to the end. Then, like this comment where you're watching from, and tell me who you'd trust when protocol fails. They said she has never done complex surgery, like the sentence could seal a person shut. In the daylight, in the clean quiet between emergencies, the same hospital made that judgment sound almost reasonable, like a rule written into the walls. On the third floor of Gateway Regional Trauma Center in St. Louis, the fluorescent lights carried a steady hum that you stopped noticing after a while, the way you stop noticing your own heartbeat until something goes wrong. The supply corridor smelled of alcohol wipes and cardboard dust and old antiseptic. It was too bright for a hallway that never saw the sun. Dr. Lila Morgan stood alone between steel shelving, a clipboard tucked against her ribs. She counted without moving her lips. Her eyes tracked labels, lot numbers, expiration dates, the kind of details most people treated like background noise. A stack of suture kits sat in a neat row. Someone had written 30 Vicryl in thick marker and underlined it twice. Another box said 40 nylon. A third read chromic gut, the kind the hospital kept ordering even though no one asked for it. It was the sort of waste that happened when procurement listened to codes more than people. She slid one box forward with the edge of her finger, reading the printed label, then set it back exactly where it belonged. 23 boxes. The requisition sheet said 28. Lila wrote the number down and paused. In a place like this, numbers mattered. One missing kit could turn into a frantic search when someone's life was open on a table and time had teeth. She did not look frustrated. Frustration was visible. She only made a small mark on the paper, precise as a suture throw. Footsteps sounded at the far end of the corridor. Not hurried, confident. The kind of footsteps that expected the hallway to make room. Grant Harlan appeared around the corner in a white coat so crisp it looked new. His badge swung once against his chest and settled. 31 chief surgical resident, the kind of pedigree that got you listened to before you spoke. His hair was cut close, his jaw clean-shaven, his expression already impatient. He did not look at the shelves. He did not look at the numbers in her hand. His gaze landed on Lila like she was another piece of equipment someone had left in the wrong place. "Morgan," he said. His voice carried that specific tone that did not ask a question so much as announce a fact. "You done with inventory yet?" Lila kept her eyes on the clipboard. "Almost." "Good." He adjusted the sleeve of his coat as if time itself was wrinkled. "Dr. Sloan wants the OR logs updated before rounds. And radiology still does not have Calhoun's pre-op packet. Fix it." He turned away mid-sentence, already walking, already done. His shoes tapped on the cheap linoleum, too expensive for a floor that got scrubbed with industrial bleach. Lila watched him go, not with anger, not with resentment, but with the same calm attention she gave to labels and expiration dates. Then she looked back down at her list and made another small mark. She moved to the next shelf. Sterile drapes, gowns, surgical masks. Rows stacked so straight they looked like somebody's idea of order instead of the kind of order you needed when your hands were slick and shaking and you had to find what mattered without thinking. Real order meant you could reach into a drawer with your non-dominant hand and come up with the right clamp in the dark. Lila knew that kind of order. No one here knew she knew. 2 hours later, she sat in the observation gallery above operating room 3 with a notebook open on her lap. The notebook was mostly blank. It was a prop. It made people assume she was learning instead of watching. Below, Grant stood at the table, his hands inside the controlled field of bright light, performing a routine laparoscopic appendectomy on a teenager with a white count that had climbed all afternoon. The anesthesiologist murmured numbers. A nurse passed instruments. The monitor showed a clean, magnified world of tissue and vessels and careful movement. Routine meant safe until it didn't. Grant's grasper drifted left just a few millimeters, but Lila saw the shift, the way she saw missing boxes. The tension in his hand was wrong. The angle was shallow. Too shallow. The plane he was working in was not as forgiving as he acted. Her fingers tightened once against her thigh, then went still. She kept her face neutral. She did not lean forward. She did not breathe any louder. 3 seats to her left, Dr. Jack Mercer sat with a tablet balanced on his knee, the glow reflecting in his eyes. Jack was the kind of resident who asked questions that actually mattered, not questions meant to impress. He glanced from the monitor to Lila, noticing her stillness like you notice a dog going rigid before a storm. "Something off?" he asked quietly. Lila did not look at him. "No." On the screen, Grant moved again. The tip of the instrument kissed the wrong place. The monitor flared red, sudden and obscene blood blooming into the cavity like someone had opened a valve. A sharp curse cracked through the speakers. Grant's voice came out louder than it needed to be, the volume of a man trying to turn panic into authority. "Suction. Now." The grasper's malfunctioning. Down on the floor, Dr. Evelyn Sloan stepped in without hesitation. 15 years of trauma had trained her body to move like a machine when chaos hit. She did not waste words. She took the instrument, corrected the angle, clamped, repaired the nick with practiced speed. 40 seconds, maybe less, and the bleeding slowed, then stopped. Grant stepped back, his chest rising too fast beneath his coat. "Equipment issue," he said, still too loud. Sloan did not argue. She did not correct him in front of the room. She only nodded once, cool as steel, and continued. No one looked up at the observation gallery. No one except Jack. His eyes stayed on Lila, as if she was a calculation that did not balance. She kept her gaze on the notebook pen, moving in a small, meaningless line. When the field below returned to controlled motion, she closed the notebook and stood. Jack stood too, trailing her out into the corridor. "You saw it before it happened," he said. "I watched the monitor," Lila replied. Jack waited, giving her room to tell the truth or lie. Most people watched the monitor. Lila stopped at the end of the hall, where the glass looked down on the ambulance bay. A gurney rolled past below. A nurse jogged beside it. The world outside the OR moved like a separate planet, one where seconds still mattered. Lila kept her voice even. "He's tired." Jack frowned. "He's always tired." Lila's eyes stayed on the glass. "Then he should stop pretending. Fatigue does not change hands." Jack studied her for another beat, then let it go, but not really. People rarely let something like that go. They simply folded it away until it fit. By late morning, the hospital settled into its usual rhythm. Rounds spilled through hallways, consults stacked up, phones rang, printers jammed, charts appeared in piles like snowdrifts no one admitted they caused. Lila moved through it all without friction. She carried papers from one place to another. She returned calls no one wanted to make. She updated logs that should have been automated years ago. She did not complain because complaints created ripples and ripples drew eyes. At 11, Dr. Sloan found her in the third-floor lounge where the residents pretended to rest between tasks. Sloan's hair was pulled back tight, her posture straight as a rule, her gaze sharp enough to cut. "Morgan," she said. Lila looked up from the chart she was reviewing, not because she needed to review it, but because being seen reading kept people from asking what else she knew. "I need you to take Calhoun's pre-op packet down to radiology," Sloan said. Lila blinked once. "I'm scheduled to observe the thoracotomy at 11:30. Sloan's expression did not change, but her smile briefly appeared and disappeared like a door opening onto an empty room. "And now you're scheduled to walk paperwork." "We all start somewhere, Dr. Morgan." The way she said doctor made it sound like a reminder of rank, not respect. Lila took the folder. The paper was warm from Sloan's hand. She did not argue. She did not argue because arguing was a kind of desperation, and she had learned a long time ago what desperation cost. She walked. The route to radiology took her past the emergency department and the ambulance bay windows. She slowed as she reached the glass, her steps drifting to the side like a compass needle pulled by a hidden magnet. Outside, two EMTs unloaded a gurney. A patient's chest rose and fell in ugly bursts under compressions. Blood streaked the sheet in thin lines. A monitor beeped out of sync, frantic and wrong. Lila's hand curled into a fist at her side. Her thumb pressed into the inside of her wrist where the paracord bracelet sat beneath her sleeve, faded olive, frayed at the edge. A small thing that looked like nothing. A small thing that could become everything if someone noticed the bead. She pulled her sleeve down a fraction and forced her feet to move again. Radiology smelled like plastic and cold air. The tech at the desk took the packet without looking up. Lila turned back toward the elevators and kept walking steady pace, steady face, as if the sound of compressions had not followed her into her bones. By evening, her scrubs smelled like disinfectant and fatigue. She went to the locker room, pulled open her dented metal door, and started changing out of the clothes that made her look like she belonged. Two nurses stood near the sinks, voices low, but not low enough. "You hear about Morgan?" one asked. Lila's hand paused on the zipper of her bag. "What about her?" the other nurse said. She corrected Grant during a consult. In front of the patient. A laugh short and sharp. "No way. Dead serious. He almost filed an insubordination report." "She's a first year?" the other nurse said, disbelief and irritation mixing in the same breath. "Where does she get off?" Lila closed her locker quietly and turned. Her face was blank. Her eyes were calm. She had learned how to build calm like armor. "Evening," she said. Both nurses looked at her and fell silent, like children caught gossiping in church. Neither answered. Lila picked up her duffel and walked out. The door swung shut behind her on a soft click, and the silence she left in that room was louder than their whispers. Her apartment was a sixth-floor walk-up in a building that smelled like old cooking oil and rain that never quite dried. No elevator. The stairs were narrow, the paint chipped the railing loose. She climbed without stopping, breath-controlled pace, measured the way you moved when you did not want to arrive already exhausted. Inside, the place was small enough that the kitchen and living room shared the same air. One couch, one table. One mug with tea cooling beside a worn book whose cover was cracked from use. Forward surgical medicine damage control protocols. Pages dog-eared and underlined in pencil. No photographs on the walls. No plants. No bright objects that suggested roots. Lila set her bag down and stood in the center of the room for a moment, as if listening for something that was not there. Then she moved to the sink and washed her hands. She washed like the hospital was still on her skin. Nails, knuckles, wrists. She scrubbed until the water ran clear and her fingers turned pink. Then she shut the tap and dried them slowly. She heated the tea again, even though she did not want it. Want was irrelevant. The body needed fuel. The body needed routine. Routine kept you from drifting into places you could not get out of. Her phone buzzed once against the table. A text from Jack. You knew he was going to nick that vessel. How? She stared at the message until the screen dimmed. Then she tapped it twice and deleted it. Her thumb moved with the same calm certainty she used on labels and clamps. She did not reply. Replies created threads, and threads led back to you. Outside, a siren rose in the distance, the sound bending through city streets, then passing, then fading. Another siren answered it farther away. The city did not sleep. It only changed shifts. Lila sat on the couch with the tea in her hands. The mug warmed her palms. The warmth did not travel far. She watched the wall across from her as if it might change, as if a blank surface could become a door. The ceiling above held hairline cracks thin as veins. She counted them without meaning to. 17 from this angle. 18 if she included the one forming near the light fixture. Her eyes drifted to her wrist. The paracord bracelet was faded from sun and sweat and time. It looked like something someone might have made for camping, a cheap survival accessory. The frayed end was tied off tight. Woven into the braid, almost invisible unless you knew where to look, was a small metal bead. She slid it gently between her fingers. The letters were worn, but still there if you caught the light right. FST7. Her throat tightened. Not from fear, from memory. The kind that did not need words. She closed her fist around the bracelet and held it there, pressure against skin, an anchor. For a moment, she listened, and in the quiet between sirens, she could hear another sound that was not in the room. A slow, deep rhythm, heavy rotors, a thump in the air that matched her pulse. She opened her eyes and forced her attention back to the apartment, back to the present, back to St. Louis, back to a life built out of careful silence. She set the mug down. The tea barely steamed now. She did not drink it. When she lay down, she did not bother with the bed. The couch was closer to the door, closer to the phone, closer to the exit. Old habits did not disappear. They simply found new disguises. She stared at the ceiling in the dark eyes, open, breathing in counts she did not have to think about. In 234, hold 234, out 234. The city kept humming outside. Somewhere a car alarm chirped once, then stopped. Somewhere a neighbor laughed, then shut a door. Somewhere a siren rose and fell, as steady as a heartbeat. Time passed without softness. Lila blinked slow and deliberate, then reached for the phone on the table without looking at it. She turned it face down, as if hiding the screen could hide the world. The paracord bracelet pressed lightly against her wrist when she moved. She felt it like a pulse. The room stayed dark. The air stayed still. Her phone buzzed again, sharper this time, a vibration that carried through wood and fabric and into her bones. The screen lit the ceiling with a pale rectangle of light. Lila did not reach for it right away. She let it buzz until the vibration stopped on its own, then started again, insistent, like the person on the other end believed persistence could bend reality. The phone lay face down on the table, but she knew what it meant anyway. She always knew. The hospital did not call at that hour to ask how she was sleeping. The buzzing cut off. The silence that followed felt too clean, like a room after someone drags a body out. Then the phone rang. Not a text this time. A call, the kind that did not leave you space to pretend. Lila rolled off the couch in one smooth motion, bare feet, finding the floor without a stumble. Her heart was already awake. Her body moved as if it had been waiting for permission. She grabbed the phone and answered before the second ring finished. "Dr. Morgan," she said. A dispatcher's voice came through clipped and practiced words delivered like equipment. "Mass casualty. All available staff to the emergency department. Repeat, mass casualty. All hands." The line went dead. Lila stared at the dark screen for half a beat, then set the phone down and stood there listening to the building around her. The old pipes in the wall clicked once as heat shifted. Somewhere outside, tires hissed over wet pavement. She did not turn on the lights. She dressed in the dim glow, leaking through the blinds, hands moving fast without rushing. Scrubs, socks, shoes. Hair pulled back tight until it stopped being a distraction. She checked her pockets without thinking. Badge, pen, small flashlight. Her fingers brushed the paracord bracelet on her wrist. Faded olive, frayed edges, a bead that hid its letters unless you caught the light. She pulled her sleeve down. 4 minutes after the call, she was on the stairwell, landing, down past the 5th floor, then the 4th, then into the street where the night air hit her like cold water. Sirens echoed somewhere west of her, then closer, then past. The city did not sound like sleep. It sounded like pressure building. The streets around the hospital were lit too bright and still too empty. A police cruiser idled at the curb. 2 EMTs jogged toward the ambulance bay doors with a stretcher that bounced slightly with each step, wheels rattling on the asphalt. Lila walked through the side entrance without looking at the security guard. He held the door open automatically, eyes tired, shoulders slumped. Everyone at this hour wore the same exhausted shape. The emergency department smelled wrong before she reached it. It was not just antiseptic, not just disinfectant and coffee. There was blood in the air, copper and iron, and something else that did not have a clean name. The kind of smell that grabbed the back of your throat and did not let go. The kind of smell that followed you home and sat on your clothes, even after you washed them twice. Inside the ER was already loud. Voices overlapped. Monitors beeped out of rhythm. The intercom crackled with half-heard instructions. The ambulance bay doors were propped open, letting in winter air that carried exhaust and rain. Gurneys lined the walls. A patient moaned somewhere behind a curtain. A nurse ran past with her hair coming loose, gloves already streaked red. Lila moved through the chaos like she belonged to it, not because anyone recognized her, but because she did not hesitate. Hesitation got you stepped on. She found a crash cart near Bay 4, its drawers open, supplies half missing. Someone had already used it and left it bare. Lila put her hands on it and started restocking without being asked. Gauze first, tape, airways, saline flushes, a bag of needles. She checked each drawer by feel. Her hands did not fumble. They moved with a calm certainty that came from repetition. The kind of repetition that left grooves in your nervous system. A paramedic shouted over the noise. "We have a multi-vehicle pileup on 70. 16 cars. Multiple critical." A nurse yelled back, "We are out of bays." "We make bays," someone answered. Lila kept restocking. The first wave came in fast. Blunt trauma. Broken glass. Lacerations. A woman with her face cut open, eyes wide, and shocked blood dripping down her neck like a necklace. A man holding his ribs, breathing shallow, trying not to scream. A teenager who kept asking for his mother, even as a nurse pressed gauze into a wound that would not stop oozing. Dr. Evelyn Sloan stood near the center, like the spine of the room. She was not loud. She did not need to be. When she spoke, people moved. Bay 1 takes airway. Bay 2 takes chest. Bay 3 takes abdomen. Triage in the hall if you have to. Keep your lanes. Her eyes swept the staff, sharp and assessing. Her gaze passed over Lila without stopping, like Lila was part of the wall. Jack Mercer was at the nurse's station with a coffee cup in his hand that he was not drinking. His shoulders sagged. His eyes were red at the edges, not from tears, but from time. He looked like someone who had been awake too long and knew it. He saw Lila at the crash cart and walked toward her, weaving between gurneys. "You got the call," he said. "I was up," Lila replied. Jack stared at her for a moment, the way people stared at something that did not fit. "Of course you were." A scream cut through the ER from somewhere near Bay 2. A nurse snapped orders. Lila's hands kept moving. Jack glanced down into the open drawer. "We were short on 14 gauge. We have them," Lila said. She placed a packet into the drawer and shut it with the heel of her hand. Jack looked up, distracted by a new burst of noise at the ambulance bay doors. 2 paramedics burst in, dragging a gurney hard enough that the wheels skidded. A young man lay on it, eyes half open, lips blue, chest rising in shallow jerks. A construction vest was still on his body, torn down the middle, soaked dark. The smell around him was sharp and fresh, as if the blood had not had time to cool. "Gunshot wound to the chest," one paramedic shouted. "Pressure's dropping. Pulses thready. Sat 72. The other paramedic's face was slick with sweat. He started crashing in the rig. "We lost breath sounds on the left. Trachea feels off." A nurse called, "Where is Dr. Sloan?" "Bay 1, someone yelled. "She's in a steering column impalement." "Where is Dr. Harlan?" "Upstairs." The young man on the gurney made a wet sound that might have been a word. His eyes rolled toward the ceiling. The monitor they clipped onto him screamed a fast, irregular alarm. Jack stepped forward, but his hands hovered in the air, like they were not sure where to land. His coffee cup slipped from his fingers and hit the floor, splashing brown across a tile already stained with blood. Jack blinked at it like it mattered, then shook his head hard and reached for a stethoscope. His hand was shaking. He dropped the stethoscope too. Metal clattered on tile. "Damn it," he muttered, voice tight. The paramedic shouted again. "We need a doctor now." Lila did not move at first. She stood at the crash cart, back straight, hands at her sides, watching the man's chest struggle against itself. Watching the way the skin at his neck pulled tight with each shallow breath. Watching the way his lips darkened. Her body did not want to move. It wanted to stay against the wall and disappear into the background where no one could see her. Then the noise in the ER shifted. It did not fade. It changed. Like someone turned down every sound except her heartbeat. Her vision narrowed for half a second, and the smell of blood turned into dust and heat, and something burned. A heavy rhythm filled her head, slow and deep. Not the beep of a monitor, but the thump of rotors. The world tilted and became a different place without her permission. A stretcher in sand. A boy in uniform, too young, eyes wide mouth, opening and closing like a fish pulled out of water. Her hands on his chest. Blood that was not hers. A headlamp that bounced with each breath she took. A voice in her own mouth saying, "Stay with me, stay with me." The boy's eyes fixed on her pleading, and she knew even then what she could not stop. Lila blinked. The ER snapped back into focus, bright and sterile and loud. The gurney was still there. The young man's lips were still blue. Jack's face was tight with panic he could not hide. The paramedic's voice cut through everything. "He is dying." Lila's body moved before her thoughts caught up. 3 strides and she was at the gurney, hands already reaching. Her voice came out flat, clinical, like she was reading a chart instead of standing over a life. "Tension pneumothorax," she said. "Left side. Look at his trachea." Jack stared at her as if he had not heard. "We need an attending." "There is no time," Lila said. She turned to the crash cart. Her fingers went straight to the drawer without searching. She pulled out a 14-gauge needle in its sterile pack. Her hands tore it open clean. No hesitation. No fumbling. The movement was too smooth to be learned in a book. Jack's voice rose sharp with fear. "Lila, you are not authorized." Lila did not look at him. She placed 2 fingers on the young man's chest, finding the landmark by feel. Second intercostal space, mid-clavicular. The spot lived in her muscles. It did not require thought. "If I do not decompress now," she said, "he is dead in 90 seconds. Jack's eyes flicked to the monitor, then to the man's face. The numbers were falling. The alarm screamed again. Jack swallowed. "Stop. We can call Sloan." "Then stop me," Lila said, and her voice did not shake. She swabbed the site with alcohol, quick and methodical. The smell of alcohol cut through blood for a moment, sharp and clean. She aligned the needle. Her fingers were steady. Then she pushed. The needle went in with one smooth motion. A hiss of air burst out loud and sudden like a balloon deflating. The young man's chest expanded on its own for the first time since he arrived. His eyes widened. He sucked air in ragged and desperate, then another breath. The monitor numbers climbed in small steps, stubborn and precious. 74, 78, 81. The color in his face shifted gray to pale, to the faintest hint of pink. The paramedic stared at Lila like she had just performed a miracle. "Who are you?" Lila pulled the needle, slapped an occlusive dressing on the site, and stepped back. "Get him to surgery," she said quietly. "He needs a chest tube. He may need thoracotomy if there is a vessel injury." Jack was still staring at her. His mouth opened once, then closed. The gurney rolled away as nurses swarmed it, suddenly organized by the simple fact that the patient was no longer actively dying in front of them. Lila turned back to the crash cart. Her hands moved again, already replacing what she had used, logging it without being asked. She wrote in small, neat letters, as if this was normal work. Jack appeared beside her 2 minutes later, close enough that she could feel the heat of him. "That was not protocol," he said. "I know," Lila replied. "You could have killed him." "I did not," she said, and there was no pride in it. Only fact. Jack's eyes searched her face, looking for adrenaline, for triumph, for something loud. He found nothing. Her expression was blank, but her pulse beat hard under her skin. "Where did you learn that?" he asked. Lila did not look up from the log. "I read." Jack let out a short breath that was not a laugh. That was not reading. That was muscle memory. Lila clicked the pen closed and slid it into her pocket. She shut the crash cart drawer and locked it. The sound of the lock was small, but it felt final. "Go get some water," she said. Jack caught her wrist before she could turn away. His fingers touched the fabric near her sleeve. Not aggressive, not rough, just enough to stop her. "Lila," he said again, softer this time. She looked at his hand on her arm, then at his face. Her eyes were calm. Her voice was quiet. "Do not," she said. Jack released her like he had touched a hot surface. Lila walked away through the double doors into the stairwell that no one used because the door stuck and the air smelled stale. She liked it because it was narrow and out of the way. She sat on the steps between the third and fourth floors and pressed her palms hard against her knees. Now that she was alone, the shaking started. It began in her fingers, a fine tremor that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with release. Her breath came too fast. She forced it into counts. In 2, 3, 4. Hold 2, 3, 4. Out 2, 3, 4. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears like rotor thump. She swallowed hard and looked down at her wrist. The paracord bracelet caught the emergency light, faded olive, frayed at the edge. She pulled it off and held it between her fingers. The bead turned slowly as she rotated it. FST7. She closed her fist around it. Her eyes burned. She did not cry. Crying made noise, and noise drew attention. After a minute, she put the bracelet back on, tugged her sleeve down, and sat still until her hands obeyed her again. When she returned to the ER, the room was still chaos, but it had shifted. The first wave was being stabilized. The second wave was stacking up in the hall. Nurses moved with purpose. The floor was slick in places. A biohazard bin overflowed. Dr. Sloan stepped out from Bay 1 with blood on her forearms and a calm face that looked carved. She peeled her gloves off and tossed them into the bin without looking. Her eyes scanned the room, assessing damage. Jack stood near Bay 4 with a fresh pair of gloves on his gaze, following Lila as she walked back to the crash cart. Sloane's eyes landed on Jack first. Report. Jack swallowed. Multi-vehicle trauma, multiple fractures, 2 abdominal bleeds, 1 chest gunshot. Sloane's gaze sharpened. Chest gunshot is alive. Jack hesitated for half a second too long. Sloane's eyes flicked to Lila for the first time that night, as if she had suddenly noticed a shape that was always there. How? Jack looked at Lila. He did not answer immediately. His loyalty and his curiosity wrestled in the space behind his eyes. Lila kept her face neutral. She did not speak. A nurse called out, incoming again. Sloane's attention snapped back to the door. The moment passed. She moved toward Bay 2 like a blade sliding back into its sheath, efficient and cold. Lila stayed with the crash cart, restocking logging, keeping her hands busy because idle hands carried ghosts. The night stretched. Patients came in, patients went out. Blood was cleaned, then spilled again. Someone cried in the hall. Someone laughed too loud near the nurse's station and got shushed. At 4 in the morning, Lila stood in the locker room, scrubbing her hands under cold water. She scrubbed hard nails, knuckles, wrists, as if the skin itself held memory. The door opened behind her. Jack walked in. His face looked older than it had yesterday, lines carved by hours and decisions. That was not luck, he said. Lila did not stop scrubbing. I know. So what was it? Jack asked, voice low, careful. Lila turned the water off and dried her hands slowly with paper towels. She folded the towel once, then once again, precise even here. Experience, she said. Jack stared at her. What kind of experience? Lila picked up her bag. Her fingers tightened around the strap. She looked at him for a moment, and something in her gaze made Jack stand still. The kind you do not talk about, she said. She walked out before he could find another question. Outside, dawn was starting to lighten the city gray, pushing against black. The ambulance bay was quieter now. Not silent, never silent, but quieter in the way a battlefield grew quiet after the worst of the shooting stopped. Lila stood alone under the overhang, breathing cold air that smelled like rain and exhaust. For a moment, she let herself look at the empty stretch of street beyond the hospital parking lot. The city was waking up. People would drink coffee and complain about traffic and call it stress. They would have no idea what happened inside these walls when the clock hit 2:47. A siren wailed in the distance. Lila closed her eyes for a single beat, and the sound of rotors tried to rise up behind it, but she held herself in place. When she opened her eyes, Jack was standing a few yards away, watching her from the glass doors, not approaching, not leaving. She turned and went back inside. By the time the day shift arrived, the ER looked almost normal if you did not look too closely. The floors were mopped. The bins were emptied. Fresh packs of gauze sat in open drawers. The air still carried a faint metallic undertone that no amount of disinfectant could erase. Grant Harlan stepped off the elevator in clean scrubs and a white coat like the night had never touched him. His hair was neat. His badge was straight. His expression held irritation at being pulled into chaos he had missed. He walked toward the nurse's station, scanning the board. Status. A nurse started talking fast, listing injuries, labs, admissions, transfers. Grant listened with half an ear, eyes searching for something else, for who had done what, for where his name belonged. His gaze landed on the chest gunshot case notes. He frowned. Needle decompression performed by which attending. The nurse hesitated, then looked down at the chart again. It says Dr. Morgan documented the supply use. Grant's eyes narrowed. Dr. Morgan. The intern. Jack stood a few feet away, holding a tablet. He did not look at Grant. He did not look at Lila, either. His posture was stiff, as if he was holding a weight no one else could see. Lila stood at the supply closet with a clipboard already counting again, already putting herself back into the small work the hospital believed she belonged to. Grant's gaze cut toward her, his face tightened not with anger alone, with something closer to offense. Sloane came out of Bay 2 and paused near the station, listening. Grant's voice lowered. She did a procedure. Sloane's eyes did not blink. In the middle of a mass casualty, Grant's jaw worked once. Without authorization, Jack finally spoke, voice careful. The patient would not have made it. Grant turned on him. That is not the point. Sloane's gaze moved from Grant to Jack to Lila, who kept her head down, pen moving across paper as if she could write herself out of existence. Sloane spoke quietly, and that quiet carried more force than shouting. We will address it. Grant took a breath through his nose and nodded once, the nod of a man used to being affirmed. He walked away, already rehearsing the version of the story that placed him back at the center. Lila did not look up. Her hands kept counting. Outside the hospital windows, the sun climbed higher, turning the wet streets into a dull shine. People came in for scheduled scans and routine blood work, stepping over the invisible line between normal life and the place where normal life broke. In the break room, a nurse whispered to another voice, low but excited words carrying on air that never stayed quiet for long. Did you hear? She said. The intern. Morgan. She did a decompression like she has done it 100 times. Another voice answered, skeptical. That is not possible. It happened, the first insisted. Jack saw it. Lila walked past the doorway and did not pause. She did not change her pace. She did not turn her head. But the hum of the lights above her sounded different now, not like silence, not like architecture, but like a warning you could no longer pretend not to hear. The hum of the lights sounded different once you noticed it, like the building itself was holding its breath. By late morning, the night's blood had been scrubbed from the tiles, but the smell stayed in the vents, faint metal under disinfectant. The day shift moved through the emergency department with the careful confidence of people telling themselves the worst was over. Clipboards clicked. Computers chimed. A cart squeaked down the hall. Ordinary sounds stitched over something raw. Lila kept her head down and her hands busy. She was back on the 3rd floor with a clipboard and a pen, counting supplies that should have been counted by someone else, inventory numbers that never matched the requisitions. A nurse passed her in the corridor and slowed, eyes flicking to Lila's badge, then away, like looking too long might invite a question. Lila felt it anyway, the shift in attention, the way the air got slightly tighter when she entered a room. She did not blame them. People hunted patterns. They wanted a story that made last night make sense. A first-year resident did not step into a dying chest and win without a reason. The hospital would either turn it into hero worship or rule-breaking. Either way, it would land on her like a spotlight. She stayed out of the light. In the surgical lounge, Grant Harlan sat at a table with 2 other residents, coffee, untouched, his phone face up, as if he expected it to explain why his name had not been the first one spoken this morning. His white coat hung on the back of his chair, crisp as a uniform. He spoke low, but his voice carried. She is an intern, he said. She does not freelance procedures. One of the residents nodded quickly, the way people nodded at him. Maybe she panicked. Grant's mouth tightened. Then she should have called an attending. Jack Mercer stood near the counter pouring water into a paper cup. He did not look at Grant, but his shoulders stiffened. Grant noticed anyway. He leaned back in his chair and watched Jack like he was studying a scan. "You were there," Grant said. "Was it as reckless as it sounds?" Jack sipped water eyes on the cup. "It was effective." "That is not an answer." Jack set the cup down carefully. "The patient was going to die." Grant's expression sharpened. "We do not make policy out of adrenaline." Jack met his eyes, then calm but firm. "We make policy out of outcomes too." For a moment, the room went quiet. The other residents suddenly found reasons to stare at their phones. Grant leaned forward, voice controlled. "If she wants to play hero, she can do it somewhere else." Jack did not raise his voice. He did not need to. She did not look like she was playing. Grant's jaw worked once. He stood smoothing his coat like it could iron the conversation flat, then walked out without another word. Jack exhaled slowly through his nose. His gaze drifted to the doorway as if expecting Lila to be there. She was not. She never was when people were arguing about her. Lila spent the next hours moving paperwork like it weighed nothing. She delivered pre-op forms, updated logs, replaced supplies. She kept her hands in motion because motion was safer than thought. At noon, Dr. Evelyn Sloan called a brief debrief in a small conference room off the ER. Not a formal review, not a ceremony, just a hard reset. Sloan stood at the front with a tablet in her hand, eyes scanning faces. "We had a surge," she said. "We stabilized, we transferred. We did not lose anyone in the department." A few shoulders relaxed. Sloan's gaze stayed sharp. "That does not mean last night went well." No one spoke. They waited for her to name mistakes. Sloan tapped her screen. "We had multiple moments where equipment was missing from crash carts. We had a lapse in bay assignments when the second wave arrived. We had documentation gaps." Her eyes flicked across Jack, then across the nurses, then landed on Lila, standing near the door with her clipboard. For a moment, Sloane's expression tightened, not angry, not soft, something more complicated. Sloane continued, voice even. "We follow protocol because protocol keeps people alive when emotions take over." Grant's head lifted slightly at that, like he was hearing validation. Sloane's gaze returned to the room. "Protocol also assumes the people in the room can act." Grant's face stiffened. Sloane did not look at him directly. She did not have to. "Do not confuse authority with capability," she said quietly. "And do not confuse capability with permission." A pause. The kind of pause that made everyone feel included in a lesson that was not evenly distributed. Sloane finished. "Get back to work." The meeting broke apart in a rush of shoes and scrubs. Lila stayed behind half a second, letting the room empty. When she turned to leave, Sloane spoke her name. "Dr. Morgan." Lila stopped. Sloane's voice was low, now stripped of audience. "You documented the needle use." "Yes." Sloane's eyes held her. "You did the procedure." Lila did not blink. "The patient was dying." "That is not an answer to what I asked." Lila's fingers tightened on the clipboard. She kept her voice level. "Yes." Sloane studied her face like she was reading a chart with missing history. "You understand? That could cost you." "I understand," Lila said. Sloane's gaze drifted to Lila's wrist, where the sleeve fell just short of covering the bracelet. The paracord looked like nothing. Sloane's eyes lingered a fraction longer than they should have, then lifted. "Next time," Sloane said, "you call for an attending." Lila's mouth tightened. "Next time, if there is time." Sloane's expression did not change, but something in her eyes sharpened a flicker of anger or fear. "Go." Lila left. In the hallway, she walked past the supply closet where she had stood last night, invisible until she was not. She kept moving, as if walking could erase attention. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A message not from Jack, but from an unknown number. "You do not know me, but people are talking. Be careful." Lila stared at the words for 1 second, then deleted them thumb steady. She did not need warnings. She was made of warnings. At 2:18 in the afternoon, the hospital was settling into the dull middle of a weekday. Lunch trays rattled in the cafeteria. The elevators dinged. A family argued quietly near the vending machines. The trauma board was busy, but manageable. Then the call came in. It hit the overhead speakers first, a tone that turned every head. Bridge collapse I-70 near the riverfront. Multiple vehicles. Multiple critical traumas. ETA 6 minutes. The words moved through the hospital like a shockwave. Chairs scraped. Phones flew into pockets. Coffee cups were abandoned half full. Nurses snapped gloves on as they walked. Residents jogged. The ER changed shape. Crash carts rolled into formation near the ambulance bay doors. The triage area cleared. Curtains were yanked open. Beds were pulled into the hallway. People moved with quick purpose, not frantic but fast, like a drill they had practiced and never wanted to use. Dr. Sloan stepped into the center, eyes sweeping the room. Her voice cut through the noise without shouting. Listen up. We are about to get slammed. Stay in your lanes. Follow protocol. Do not freelance. Understood. A chorus of yes rose from the staff. Lila stood near the supply closet, hands at her sides, watching. No one assigned her a bay. No one said her name. It was as if invisibility could be granted by omission. She did not ask for a role. Asking would be visible. The ambulance bay doors burst open. The first gurney came through hard enough that the wheels rattled. A man in his 40s lay on it, face gray eyes, half open, mouth slack. His abdomen was distended skin, tight and discolored. Blood soaked the sheet beneath him in a spreading dark. Male 42, a paramedic shouted. Crush injury abdomen and pelvis. Unresponsive. BP 70/40 and dropping. They wheeled him into Bay 3. Grant Harlan stepped forward and took the lead like it belonged to him. His voice snapped orders. 2 units O negative. Start a central line. Get labs. Pressure bag the fluids. 2 nurses flanked him. Jack took monitors. The room moved. The second gurney arrived. Then the third. Then the fourth. The bay doors kept opening, and with each opening, the air seemed to thin, like the hospital was spending oxygen faster than it could make it. Out of bays, a nurse shouted. Hallway Sloan snapped. We triage there. The ER became a corridor of bodies and rushing feet, a narrow river of trauma. Someone screamed in pain. Someone else made no sound at all. Lila's eyes moved from patient to patient, not lingering triage scanning pattern recognition. Pale skin, fast pulse, irregular breathing, the sheen of sweat that meant shock. Her gaze kept returning to Bay 3, the man Grant was working on. She could see it from the edge of chaos without stepping closer. The abdomen was too tight. The discoloration was wrong. The heart rate climbed on the monitor numbers, jumping like they wanted to escape. 140, 145. Internal bleeding fast. Lila's mouth opened slightly. No sound came out. She closed it again. Not her patient. Not her call. Grant moved quickly, placing lines, pushing fluids, barking orders, but the numbers did not care about authority. The blood pressure sank. 60/30. Then 50. Jack's voice came tight. Pressure is dropping. Grant's hands kept moving, but there was a new edge in his motion, a hint of fear. Push more fluids. We are maxed, Jack said. Then push blood, Jack said. And even the use of Grant's first name sounded like a warning he is not responding. Grant's jaw clenched. I know that. The monitor alarm screamed. 45/20. Grant froze for half a second. In trauma, a second was everything. Lila moved. Not running. Walking. Calm, deliberate, like she had all the time in the world, and that calm was contagious. She stepped into Bay 3. Step aside. Grant blinked as if the words had not registered. What? Lila's eyes stayed on the patient, not on Grant. Step aside. Grant's face flushed. You are not even assigned to this bay. Lila spoke as if reading a report. Ruptured spleen. Pelvic fracture with arterial bleeding. If you do not get him to an OR in the next 2 minutes, he dies. Grant's mouth opened, then closed. We do not have an OR. They are full. Lila's gaze lifted to his. Her voice did not rise. Then I do it here. The room went silent, the kind of silence that happens when people realize a line is about to be crossed. Sloan appeared in the doorway, eyes sharp. Excuse me. Lila did not look at her. She was already pulling on gloves. I need a scalpel, retractors, clamps, suction, and 4 units O negative. Now. Sloane stepped closer, voice like ice. You are not authorized. Lila's hands paused for the first time. She looked at Sloane then. Her eyes were steady, but something deep in them was taut, stretched thin. Then let him die, Lila said. The words hung in the air. There was no drama in them, no performance, just fact. Sloane stared at her. Grant stared at her. Nurses stared. Jack's eyes flicked from the monitor to Lila's hands. Jack moved first. He grabbed the trauma tray from the crash cart and shoved it toward her. Here. Lila took it and set it on the bed. She flipped it open. Metal gleamed under lights. Jack, Lila said, voice firm, now you are on the monitor. Call out pressures every 30 seconds. Jack swallowed and nodded. Okay. Harlan, she said, and the use of his last name sounded like stripping his rank. You are on suction. Keep the field clear. Grant did not move. Lila looked at him. Now. Grant's hands jerked into motion like he had been shocked. A nurse stepped forward with a scalpel in a sterile pack. Lila tore it open. Her hand was steady. She made the incision. Midline clean fast. No hesitation. Blood welled up immediately, dark and heavy. Lila did not flinch. She suctioned with her left hand, her right hand already inside the abdominal cavity, fingers sweeping for source, for damage, for landmarks. So, retractor, she said. A nurse placed it into her hand. Lila set it with practiced ease, spreading the incision to see. There she murmured more to herself than anyone. Splenic bed. Grade 4 laceration. She reached for a clamp without looking. It appeared in her hand. She placed it at the perfect angle, pressure exact, stopping the worst of the bleeding without crushing tissue. The monitor beeped, frantic but slightly less desperate. Jack's voice trembled as he called numbers. BP 55/30. Heart rate 150. Pelvic binder tight, Lila said. Now, hard. 2 nurses scrambled, wrapping the binder around the patient's hips, cinching down with force. Lila's hands moved deeper, packing gauze, compressing, controlling. She worked like she had done this in conditions worse than a clean ER. She worked like the room around her did not exist. Grant suctioned blood away, face-pale eyes fixed on Lila's hands. His mouth was slightly open. He looked like a man watching a ghost use his own body. Pressure, Jack said, voice louder now as the numbers shifted. 60/35. Keep calling, Lila said. She packed tighter. I need tamponade on the posterior bleed. If we do not slow it, he will exsanguinate before we move. A nurse handed more gauze. Lila stuffed it in with controlled force, not frantic, not gentle. Enough. Proline, she said. 40. A suture appeared. Lila's fingers moved fast, needle driver, flicking bites precise. 3 stitches. 4. 5. Temporary repair. Not pretty. Not final. Life-saving. Jack's voice rose with surprise. 70/40. 80/50. The alarm eased from scream to insistence. Lila stepped back half a pace, evaluating. She did not smile. She did not exhale in relief. Relief was a luxury. Close skin temporarily, she said. Staples. Someone stapled. The sound was sharp, mechanical. Lila pulled off her gloves and tossed them into the bin. Her scrubs were soaked from the waist down, blood dark and sticky. Her face remained blank. Get him to OR2 the second it opens, she said. He needs splenectomy and pelvic fixation. He has at least 2 liters in his abdomen. No one spoke. They were still staring. Sloane's mouth was slightly open. Her eyes were locked on Lila as if she was seeing her for the first time. Grant's hands trembled around the suction tubing. He looked away, then back, as if he hoped the sight would change if he blinked. Jack swallowed hard. Where did you learn to do that? Lila did not answer. She walked out of the bay. The corridor outside was chaos again, but the space around her felt oddly clear, like people moved aside without realizing. She passed a gurney, with a woman moaning softly, past a nurse crying quietly into a mask, past a resident with blood on his shoes, staring at his hands like he did not recognize them. Lila pushed through the double doors, into the stairwell, and sat on the steps, between the 3rd and 4th floors. The shaking hit immediately. Her hands trembled hard enough that her fingers pressed against her knees and bounced. Her breath came too fast. In, out, in, out. She forced it into counts. In 2, 3, 4. Hold 2, 3, 4. Out 2, 3, 4. The tremor eased slightly, then returned stubborn as memory. She stared at her wrist. The paracord bracelet sat there, faded olive frayed end. She could feel the bead under the braid. She did not take it off this time. She simply pressed her thumb into it, through the sleeve, a small pain to anchor her. Footsteps sounded above. Someone opened the stairwell door. Lila kept her head down. Jack's voice came through, careful. Lila. She did not answer. Jack stepped down 2 stairs, then stopped, keeping distance like she was a wild animal that might bolt. They are asking questions, he said. Lila swallowed. Let them. Jack hesitated. Grant is furious. Lila's voice was flat. He should be. Jack's breath caught slightly, not with offense, but with something like fear for her. Sloane was in the doorway. She saw everything. Lila nodded once, a small movement. Good. Jack took a step closer, then stopped again. Why are you here? Lila's head lifted slowly. Her eyes were red at the edges, not from tears, but from the effort of holding them back. I work here. That is not what I meant. Lila stared at him. For a moment, the mask slipped and something old showed through something exhausted and raw. I came here because no one was supposed to know me, she said quietly. I came here to disappear. Jack's mouth opened, then closed. He did not have a response that fit. A loud call echoed from the ER beyond the stairwell door. Another patient crashing. Another alarm. Jack glanced toward the sound torn. Lila spoke again, softer. Go. Jack swallowed and nodded. He turned and left. Lila stayed on the steps until her hands steadied enough to be useful. Then she stood and walked back into the ER as if nothing had happened. The bridge collapse kept feeding them patience until the afternoon light outside turned dull and tired. When the last gurney rolled in, the staff looked like they had been wrung out. Faces streaked with sweat. Gloves snapped off and replaced. Scrubs stained and damp. The man from Bay 3 was wheeled upstairs the moment an OR opened. As they pushed him out, his blood pressure held. Not good, not stable, but alive enough to fight. Grant followed the gurney part way, then stopped in the hall, watching it disappear like it was carrying something else away with it. Pride. Control. The story he told himself about his own hands. He turned and looked back toward the ER doors, eyes landing on Lila, near the supply closet, clipboard in hand, already restocking, already shrinking. His expression hardened. He walked toward her and stopped close enough that his voice did not need to rise. You will not do that again, he said. Lila looked up at him. Her face was calm. Do what? Take over my bay. It was not your bay, Lila said. It was a patient. Grant's nostrils flared. You embarrassed me. Lila's gaze held steady. I kept him alive. Grant's mouth tightened. You do not get to decide when rules apply. Lila's voice stayed even. Rules are tools. Tools break when they do not fit the situation. Grant stared at her anger and something else fighting under his skin. You are going to get yourself fired. Lila nodded once, maybe. Grant took a step back, like her lack of fear unsettled him more than defiance. He turned sharply and walked away. Lila returned to her clipboard. Her pen moved in small, neat strokes. By early evening, the hospital had settled into a bruised quiet. The ER was still busy, but the edge had dulled. Nurses moved slower. Residents leaned against walls for 5 seconds at a time, pretending it was rest. The overhead lights hummed without mercy. Whispers started almost immediately. In the locker room, someone said, she opened an abdomen in the ER. At the nurse's station, someone said, she clamped a splenic bleed like she has done it her whole life. In the resident lounge, someone said, Harlan froze and she took over. The story spread through the hospital like smoke, curling into corners, sliding under doors. The more it spread, the more it changed. A laparotomy became a battlefield surgery. A clamp became a miracle. A quiet resident became a myth. Lila heard pieces of it as she walked. She did not react. She did not correct. Correction invited conversation. Conversation invited attention. At 3:12 in the afternoon, she went to the cafeteria because her body demanded fuel. She did not feel hunger, but she understood biology. A body without calories became slow. Slow became mistakes. Mistakes became death. Sometimes someone else's death, sometimes yours. The cafeteria was half empty. Lunch rush had passed. Dinner crowd had not arrived. A handful of nurses sat slumped at tables staring at their phones like the screens might offer relief. A group of residents laughed too loudly near the soda machine, the sound sharp and brittle. Lila took a tray, picked up a sandwich and coffee, and sat at a corner table where she could see the doors. Habit. Exit. Awareness. She did not eat right away. She stared at her coffee as it cooled, watching the steam vanish. Across the room, Jack sat with two other residents, but he was not talking. His gaze kept drifting toward Lila, then away, then back, like he was trying to decide whether to approach her or protect her by staying distant. Lila kept her eyes on the table. She did not want him to come over. She did not want anyone to come over. The cafeteria doors opened. A man walked in who did not belong to the hospital. Mid-40s, buzz-cut, gone silver at the temples, a tan jacket with too many pockets, cargo pants worn at the knees. His boots looked like they had seen real dirt, the kind that did not wash out. He moved with a calm, scanning attention, eyes sweeping the room in slow arcs, measuring. He was not lost. He was looking for someone. His gaze landed on Lila. He stopped. Then he walked straight toward her. Lila did not notice at first. She was staring at her tray, mind drifting toward the stairwell, toward blood, toward the feel of gauze packing into warm tissue. Muscle memory did not wash off. It waited. The man stopped 3 feet from her table. "Captain Morgan," he said. His voice was low, steady, the voice of someone used to giving orders and being heard. Lila's entire body went rigid. Not fear, reflex. Her spine straightened, her hands flattened on the table, her eyes snapped up. The man stood with shoulders, square hands at his sides, expression calm but intent. He did not smile. He did not threaten. He looked at her like he was seeing a person he had not expected to see again in this lifetime. Lila's throat tightened. She forced her voice to stay controlled. "I think you have me confused with someone else," she said. The man's eyes did not flicker. "No, ma'am. I do not." The cafeteria noise faded slightly, not because it changed, but because Lila's focus narrowed. She felt Jack's gaze from across the room. She felt other eyes begin to turn. The man took one small step closer, respectful distance. Closing, not aggressive, just insistent. "Forward Surgical Team 7, he said. "Helmand Province, 2015 to 2017. Lila's jaw tightened. "You saved my life in a field hospital outside Sangin," he continued. "You took shrapnel out of my chest with a multi-tool and a headlamp because the generator was down." Lila's fingers curled slightly against the edge of the tray. Her coffee cup trembled once, a small vibration she could not fully control. "You are mistaken," she said, but the words sounded thin. The man's expression softened. "I am not here to cause trouble." Lila's voice sharpened. "Stop." He held up one hand slightly, palm open, not surrender, reassurance. "I just wanted to say thank you." He reached into his jacket, slowly, careful, like he knew sudden movements could trigger something. He pulled out a small wallet and opened it. Inside was a military ID. Then a photograph, faded and creased but clear enough. A younger version of the man lay on a cot in a tent chest, bandaged face pale. Lila stood over him, headlamp strapped to her forehead. Hands covered in blood, eyes focused and calm. The background was canvas walls and shadow, a world lit by harsh light and urgency. Lila stared at the photo. The air left her lungs in a quiet rush. "I never forgot your face," the man said. "My name is Mark Callahan, Sergeant First Class. Retired." His voice softened further. "You gave me 20 more years than I was supposed to have. I got to meet my daughter. I got to walk her down the aisle last year." Lila's eyes burned, her vision blurred at the edges. She fought it, blinking slowly. "Because of you," Callahan said. Lila stood so fast, her chair scraped hard against the floor. The sound cut through cafeteria noise like a knife. Heads turned fully now. Conversations dropped into silence. Lila's voice came out tight. "I do not know what you think you remember." Callahan did not press forward. He stayed where he was, letting her have space. "Captain." "I am not a captain," Lila snapped. "You were," Callahan said, not challenging, stating. "Trauma surgeon attached to the unit. 2 tours. Over 200 combat field operations. Nominated for a Bronze Star after you opened a chest under mortar fire and saved 3 Marines who should not have survived the night." Lila's hands shook. She pressed them against her sides, trying to hide it. "Stop." Callahan's eyes softened with understanding. "Ma'am, I am not here to hurt you." "I said stop," Lila said again, and her voice cracked on the last word. The cafeteria was quiet now. Even the soda machine seemed too loud. Callahan took a breath. "I just wanted you to know you mattered. I was not supposed to have my life back. You gave it back." Lila could not breathe properly. Her throat felt too tight. She grabbed her tray sandwich, sliding coffee sloshing, and turned away. She walked fast, not running, but close, pushing through the cafeteria doors into the hallway like she could escape the photo by changing rooms. Behind her, Callahan did not follow. Jack did. He was on his feet before he thought about it, moving through the cafeteria, weaving between chairs, eyes locked on Lila's back. He pushed through the doors into the hall and called her name. "Lila, wait." She did not stop. He jogged to catch up. Was he telling the truth? Lila's shoulders stiffened. "Leave it alone. Were you in the military?" I said leave it. Jack's voice dropped, not accusing, pleading. 200 operations. Lila stopped so abruptly Jack almost collided with her. She turned. Her eyes were red. Her face was controlled, but the control was thin now, stretched tight over something shaking. "You do not know what you are talking about," she said. "Then tell me," Jack said. Lila's lips parted, and for a second it looked like words might come, like truth might spill out because holding it in hurt too much. Then her eyes hardened. "No," she said. Jack's brow furrowed. "Why not?" Lila's voice went low, raw. "Because that person does not exist anymore." Jack stared at her. "I am not her." Lila said, each word forced through clenched teeth. "I left. I walked away. I am not going back." She turned and walked away down the hall, through double doors, disappearing into the sterile maze of the hospital. Jack stood frozen, watching the place she vanished, chest rising and falling like he was trying to catch up to a truth that moved faster than him. By 7 that evening, the story had mutated into certainty. It moved through the hospital like wildfire. In the locker room, someone said Morgan was military. At the nurses' station, someone said not just military, special operations medical. In the resident lounge, someone said, that guy had proof. Photos. Records. Lila heard it all and kept walking. She went back to the stairwell between the 3rd and 4th floors and sat on the steps with her head in her hands. The emergency department noise seeped through the walls, muffled but constant. Monitors, voices, footsteps, the hospital breathing. She tried to breathe with it. In 2-3-4. Hold 2-3-4. Out 2-3-4. Her wrists felt too exposed. She tugged her sleeve down, covering the bracelet, hiding the bead. The letters underneath her skin might as well have been branded. Footsteps sounded above again. The stairwell door opened. Lila did not look up. Jack's voice came quietly closer now. "They are talking about you." Lila's hands stayed over her face. "Let them." Jack stepped down 2 stairs and sat careful distance. He did not touch her. He did not crowd her. He sat like a friend, like a witness. "I do not care what you did before," he said. "I care that you are here now." Lila's voice came out as a whisper from behind her hands. "I did not want anyone to know." Jack nodded slowly. "I know. I came here to disappear." Jack exhaled. It did not work. Lila let her hands drop. Her eyes were wet, but she did not cry. She looked at the concrete wall as if it might offer answers. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. Jack shook his head. "I do not know." Lila stared at the wall for a long moment. Her jaw tightened. She could feel the hospital above her, the world outside the way information moved once it escaped containment. She could feel eyes turning, questions forming, paperwork waiting, authority preparing to respond. She closed her eyes for a second, and behind them the cafeteria photo flashed: the tent, the headlamp, the blood, the version of herself she had tried to bury under inventory sheets and quiet compliance. When she opened her eyes, the hum of the lights was still there, steady and merciless. She stood. Jack stood too. Lila did not speak. She walked back into the corridor and toward the ER with the same calm pace she had used when she stepped into Bay 3. Not because she felt calm, but because the body knew how to perform calm even when the mind was breaking. In the emergency department, the evening shift had taken over. The board was full. The air was heavy with disinfectant and fatigue. Nurses glanced up as Lila passed, eyes lingering a second too long, then sliding away. Grant Harlan stood near the nurses' station, speaking to Dr. Sloan in a low, controlled voice. When he saw Lila, his words stopped mid-sentence. Sloan followed his gaze. For a moment, the three of them existed in the same space, held by the weight of everything unsaid. Sloan's eyes narrowed slightly, assessing. Grant's face was tight with anger and something like dread. Lila's expression was blank. Sloan's voice cut through the silence. "Dr. Morgan." Lila stopped. Sloan held her gaze. "Come with me." Lila did not ask where. She did not ask why. She simply nodded once and followed footsteps steady on tile that had seen too much. They walked past closed curtains and open bays, past crash carts lined like soldiers, past the supply closet where Lila had built her invisibility. Sloan did not speak until they reached an empty exam room and closed the door. Inside the room felt too bright, too clean, too small. Sloan turned to face Lila. Her posture was rigid, as if she was holding herself back from something. Her voice came out controlled. "What is your name?" she asked. Lila blinked once. "Lila Morgan." Sloan's eyes did not move. And before that, Lila's throat tightened. Sloan leaned forward slightly, palms flat on the exam table, gaze unwavering. "Do not lie to me in my department." Lila stared at her for a long moment. Her heartbeat thudded against the bracelet under her sleeve. Then she spoke, voice quiet, steady, and completely stripped of softness. "My name is Lila Morgan," she said again. Sloan's jaw clenched. She held the stare, then straightened control, returning like a mask, sliding back into place. "Fine," Sloan said. "Then we will deal with what I can prove." She opened the door. The hallway noise rushed back in. Somewhere a monitor beeped. Somewhere a patient coughed hard. Somewhere a nurse laughed once, then stopped. Lila stepped out, and the hospital's attention felt like heat on her skin. Sloan opened the exam room door, and the hallway noise poured back in, thick and constant. The hospital moved around Lila as if nothing had changed, but every glance felt weighted now, every pause in conversation turning into a gap she could fall into. She walked beside Sloan, past curtained bays and stainless carts, past nurses who looked up and then looked away, too fast, past residents who pretended their tablets were more interesting than a living roomer. Sloan stopped at the nurses' station and spoke to the charge nurse in a low voice. Lila caught fragments: incident report, documentation, review. The words sounded ordinary, the kind administrators use to wrap consequences in paper. Grant stood a few feet away, arms crossed, watching Lila like she was a problem he could solve if he stared long enough. His gaze flicked to her wrist, then to her face, then away. Jack hovered at the edge of the station, not close enough to be accused of taking sides, not far enough to be absent. His eyes stayed on Lila, with the same expression he wore when he watched a monitor start to drop. Focused, worried, ready to move. Sloan turned back to Lila. Her voice was calm, controlled, and it held the weight of rank. "You will stay in your lane," she said. "You will document everything. You will not touch another patient without an attending present." Lila nodded once. "If there is time." Sloan's eyes narrowed. "There is always time to call." Lila did not argue. Arguing with Sloan was like arguing with a door that never opened. She turned toward the supply closet, the place that had always been her hiding spot, and put her hands on the crash cart drawers like she could anchor herself to something simple. The overhead speakers crackled. A tone filled the ER sharp enough to snap heads up. The kind of tone that did not belong to routine. "Attention, all available staff. Mass trauma inbound. Industrial explosion at Riverfront Refinery. Multiple critical burns. Crush injuries. Respiratory distress. All hands to the emergency department. Repeat. All hands to the emergency department immediately. The air changed. The sound of the room did not get louder. It got tighter, like a belt pulled one notch further. The charge nurse cursed under her breath and started calling names. Nurses moved toward the ambulance bay doors. Someone rolled out extra gurneys. Someone else pulled the burn cart from storage. A resident ran for airway supplies. Sloane's posture shifted into command. She stepped into the center of the ER and raised her voice just enough to cut through noise. Burn triage in the hall. Airway team in Bay 1. Chest in Bay 2. Abdomen in Bay 3. Do not improvise. Do not freelance. Keep your roles. The words landed and the room tried to become organized. Then the first gurney came through the doors. The patient was a man with soot blackening his face, skin blistered and peeling on his neck and arms. His eyes were wide but unfocused. His breathing was shallow, fast, and wrong. Every inhale sounded wet, like fluid was filling spaces that should hold air. 48-year-old male, a paramedic shouted. Explosion at refinery. Full thickness burns to upper torso. Suspected inhalation injury. SAT is dropping. Behind him came another gurney, then another. Skin sloughing off in strips, hands curled in pain, faces smeared with ash and blood. Some screamed. Some made no sound at all. The silent ones were worse. Lila stood near the supply closet and watched the room overload in real time. She felt the hospital trying to hold shape and failing like a dam cracking. People moved fast, but speed without direction turned into collisions. Sloane was in Bay 1 hands, already inside a burn case. Voice clipped. She called for fluids for airway for escherotomy tray. Her movements were precise, but her face had gone pale beneath the hard mask. Grant took Bay 2. The moment he saw the first chest case, his shoulders tightened. He reached for a needle, hands moving too quickly, angle wrong. He pressed at the chest wall with fingers that did not seem to trust what they felt. Jack took Bay 4 and reached for an intubation kit, eyes narrowing as he assessed a woman whose throat was swelling shut. He opened the drawer, grabbed a tube, then hesitated. The size in his hand looked wrong. A nurse shouted, "We need another attending. We are drowning." No one answered because there was no one to answer. A gurney rolled into Bay 5 and stopped. A woman in her 30s lay on it, unresponsive abdomen, swollen blood pooling under the sheet in a dark, quiet spread. The kind of bleed that did not announce itself with screaming. No one looked at her. They were too busy with the loud deaths. Lila watched Bay 5 for one beat longer than she should have. Her eyes tracked the puddle growing beneath the gurney. Her mind did the math without permission. Volume, time, distance to an open operating room that did not exist. She looked back at the center of the ER. Grant's needle angle was too lateral. If he pushed, he would puncture lung tissue and buy them a new problem. Jack's tube was too small. He would fight it and lose time he did not have. Bay 5 had minutes. Lila stepped forward. She did not shout. She did not wave her arms. She spoke one word. Stop. No one stopped. The room was too loud. She said it again louder, and her voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Stop. This time, movement stuttered. A nurse froze mid-step. A resident looked up with wide eyes. Even the paramedics slowed, startled. Sloane lifted her head from Bay 1, eyes flashing. Grant paused with the needle in his hand, confusion and anger fighting across his face. Jack stopped mid-motion, laryngoscope in hand, his gaze snapping toward Lila like a compass needle. Lila stood in the center of the ER, shoulders square, hands relaxed at her sides. Her calm was unnatural, and that calm pulled the room toward it. She pointed at Grant. Second intercostal space, Lila said. Mid-clavicular line. You are too far lateral. Grant stared at her like she had no right to be speaking. What did you say? You are too far lateral, Lila repeated. Adjust your angle, or you will collapse his lung. Grant's jaw tightened. I know what I am doing. The patient on his gurney made a wet, gurgling sound that ended in a cough of blood. Lila did not blink. She pointed at Jack. Switch to a size 7 tube, she said. His airway is too edematous for a 6. You are wasting time. Jack's eyes widened slightly. He glanced at the swelling, then at the tube in his hand. His throat bobbed. He set it down and reached for a larger size without arguing. Lila pointed at Bay 5. "That patient has a ruptured diaphragm," she said, voice steady. "Bowel is herniating into the chest. She has minutes. Get her to OR 1 now." No one moved. The room held still, like it was waiting for permission from someone with authority. Sloane stepped into the center, wiping blood from her glove onto a towel with a sharp motion. Her eyes locked on Lila. "Who the hell do you think you are?" Sloane said. Lila turned to face her. Her voice stayed calm, flat, final. "Someone who has done this before." Sloane's face flushed, anger rising. "You are a first-year resident." Lila's gaze did not drop. 200 combat field operations. The words landed in the ER and sucked oxygen out of it. Grant's mouth opened slightly. He looked away, then back, as if the statement had physically struck him. A nurse whispered, "What?" Sloane's eyes sharpened into something dangerous. "Get back to the supply closet." "No," Lila said. Sloane took a step closer. "Get out of my ER." "No," Lila said again, and her tone did not change. For a moment, the room vibrated with more than monitors and voices. It felt electric, as if a storm had moved indoors. Then another sound pushed in. Deep, rhythmic, distant at first. Rotor, thump. Every head turned upward as if the ceiling might split. The lights flickered once. The sound grew heavier, closer, a vibration that ran through the floor and up into bones. Grant muttered, "What is that?" Lila closed her eyes for a single beat. Her throat tightened. When she opened them, her face was blank again. Sloane stared at the ceiling, then at the ambulance bay doors. Who authorized a medevac? Lila did not answer because she already knew it was not for a patient. The building trembled as something heavy settled onto the rooftop helipad. A minute later, the ER doors opened. Not the ambulance bay doors, the main entrance. The kind of entrance used for visitors and administrators, not for war. 3 people walked in. 2 wore army uniforms, crisp and immaculate, in a room soaked with soot and blood. 1 was a colonel, tall gray at the temples, posture straight as if he never slouched. Ribbons lined his chest in neat rows. His boots looked polished enough to reflect light. Beside him was a major, younger, eyes alert, jaw tight, scanning the room like it was a threat assessment. Behind them walked a civilian woman in a dark blazer badge, clipped to her belt, hair pulled back tight. Her gaze moved quickly, cataloging faces, exits, cameras, security. The colonel stopped just inside the ER and let his presence fill the space. He did not need to raise his voice. The room quieted around him anyway. His eyes found Lila immediately. "Captain Morgan," he said. Lila's shoulders stiffened. She did not turn her head at first, as if not looking might erase him. "I am not a captain anymore, sir," she said. The colonel's expression did not soften, but there was no cruelty in it. Once a captain, always a captain. Sloane stepped forward, anger and confusion mixing. "Excuse me, who are you?" The colonel finally looked at her. "Colonel Robert Sutherland, Army Medical Command." He gestured slightly toward the woman in the blazer. "Agent Claire Monroe, Defense Intelligence Agency." Sloane's mouth opened, then closed. The words she wanted did not fit into the moment. Sutherland turned back to Lila. "We need to talk." Lila stood still. Her hands were steady at her sides, but the bracelet under her sleeve felt like a pulse. "We are in the middle of a mass casualty," Sloane snapped, trying to reclaim control. "You cannot walk in here and take staff." Sutherland's gaze flicked to the ER, the burn victims, the frantic movement resuming at the edges now that the room had its shock. He looked back at Sloane. "We are also in the middle of a mass casualty," he said quietly. "Just in a different place." Sloane's eyes narrowed. "This is a civilian hospital, and she is a civilian physician," Agent Monroe said, voice crisp, precise. "For now." Lila's jaw clenched. "Say what you came to say." Sutherland did not waste time. A coalition medical convoy was hit outside Kandahar 6 hours ago. Multiple casualties. The surgical team on site is overwhelmed. They requested emergency reinforcements. Lila's throat tightened. Kandahar. The word carried heat and dust and rotor thump. Sutherland continued, voice steady. They asked for you by name. Lila shook her head once small automatic. No. Sutherland watched her closely. You left. We know. I left that life, Lila said, voice low. Sutherland nodded slightly. I know, and I respect it. Agent Monroe's gaze stayed sharp. Respect does not stop hemorrhage. Lila's eyes flashed toward her, then back to Sutherland. Find someone else. Sutherland's voice softened just a fraction. There are 16 people dying right now because they do not have someone with your hands. The ER noise swelled again around them, a burn victim coughing, a nurse calling for suction, a monitor alarming. The hospital was still falling apart in real time. Sloane stepped in, anger sharpened by stress. You are not taking my resident. Lila's mouth tightened. I am not your resident. Sloane stiffened. Sutherland's gaze stayed on Lila. I am not ordering you, Captain. I am asking. Lila stared at the floor for a moment. Her hands curled once, then relaxed. The tremor wanted to start. She forced it down with breath. In 2, 3, 4. Hold 2, 3, 4. Out 2, 3, 4. She lifted her eyes. How long? Sutherland answered immediately. 72 hours. Maybe less. We can have you back by the end of the week. Lila's mouth went dry. She glanced past Sutherland's shoulder at the ER at Sloane's Bay at Grant, with the needle still in his hand, at Jack intubating with a larger tube, now moving faster, cleaner. Lila looked back at Sutherland. I want full access to this ER when I return. Sloane's head snapped toward her. Excuse me. Lila did not look at Sloane. She kept her eyes on the colonel. No more inventory duty. No more paperwork runs. I do the job I was trained to do. Sutherland nodded once. Done. Agent Monroe's eyes flicked to Sutherland, then to Lila, assessing. We will need you to sign. I will sign, Lila said. Sutherland's expression stayed controlled, but relief touched his eyes like a shadow passing. Thank you. He turned slightly toward Agent Monroe. Prep her. Monroe nodded and lifted a phone, already sending messages. Sutherland looked back at Lila. Wheels up in 30 minutes. Sloane stepped forward, voice tight with fury. This is unacceptable. She is in the middle of a trauma surge. Lila finally turned to Sloane. Her face was calm. Her eyes were steady. You told me to stay in my lane, Lila said. My lane is wherever people are bleeding. Sloane's face went pale, then red. You are not leaving. You are not abandoning this department. Lila's voice stayed flat. I am not abandoning anyone. I am being reassigned by a chain of command you do not control. Sloane's hands clenched. You have no privileges to make that decision. Lila held her gaze. You did not give me privileges. You gave me inventory. Sloane looked like she might speak again, but the ER alarms pulled her attention back. A patient in Bay 1 started desaturating. A nurse shouted for airway. Sloane's jaw clenched and she pivoted back into the chaos because lives were louder than pride. Lila turned to Jack. He stood in Bay 4 tube, seated now, eyes fixed on the monitor as the oxygen saturation climbed. He looked up when he felt her gaze. Their eyes met across the room. Lila walked to him with quick, controlled steps. Bay 5, she said quietly, close enough that only he could hear. Ruptured diaphragm. Do not wait for permission. Get her to OR 1 now. Jack's throat bobbed. He glanced toward Bay 5, saw the pooled blood, the stillness. No attending, he said. Lila's eyes held his. You know what to do. Jack nodded, once the nod of someone stepping onto a line that could ruin him or save someone. I will take her, good, Lila said. She turned and walked toward Bay 2, where Grant stood, stiff needle in his hand, face pale. Grant watched her approach like she was a storm. His pride had nowhere to go now. Lila stopped beside him and looked at the patient's chest at the angle of Grant's needle. Correct it, she said. Grant's jaw tightened. I was about to. Lila's eyes did not change. Correct it now. Grant adjusted hands, shaking less when he did what he was told. He inserted. The hiss of air sounded again, smaller than before, but still life-changing. The patient's breathing eased. Grant stared at the monitor as numbers improved. He swallowed hard. He did not look at Lila. You did not have to humiliate me. Lila's voice stayed quiet. I did not do this to you. You did this to you. Grant flinched as if struck. Lila walked away before his anger could find words. She moved back to the supply closet and grabbed her duffel bag from the hook where she kept it. She pulled on a clean jacket over her scrub sleeves, down bracelet hidden. She checked her pockets, simple, methodical, as if leaving a war zone was the same as leaving a shift. Agent Monroe appeared beside her like she had materialized from air. "Come with me." Lila followed. They moved through a side corridor toward a service elevator, away from public hallways. Security guards appeared at intersections, silent, directing traffic without drawing attention. The hospital felt suddenly like it had layers, and she was being moved through ones most staff never saw. In the elevator, Monroe held a tablet out. Her voice was quiet. "Volunteer status for temporary deployment. Liability and medical credential verification on arrival. You are covered under existing agreements." Lila signed without reading. Her name looked strange on the screen, too clean for what it carried. The elevator opened onto the rooftop access. Cold air hit her face. The sky was black, the city lights below scattered like embers. The helicopter sat on the helipad, with its rotors spinning blades, slicing the air into a steady roar that vibrated in her chest. The sound did not scare her. It made her stomach tighten. It made her memories stand up. Sutherland stood near the aircraft, one hand on a duffel bag, posture steady against the wind. The major waited beside him, eyes scanning the roof perimeter. Sutherland lifted his voice just enough to be heard. "Captain Morgan." Lila stopped a few feet away. The rotor wash tugged at her jacket. Her hair stayed tight back. She did not let the wind touch her face too much. It felt like hands. "I told you," she said, voice low. "I am not a captain." Sutherland's gaze stayed steady. "You can call yourself whatever you want. The people out there do not care about the title. They care about the skill." Lila's eyes flicked to the helicopter door, then back. "You pulled my kit." Sutherland held up the duffel. "From storage, as requested." Lila stared at the bag like it was a weapon. She did not reach for it yet. Agent Monroe moved closer, voice clipped. "We have a transport plane staged at Scott Air Force Base. Direct flight. We do not waste time." Lila looked past them to the city below. Somewhere down there, the ER kept filling. Jack would be moving Bay 5. Sloan would be running airway in Bay 1. Grant would be trying to hold his hands steady. Lila inhaled cold air. Her breath steamed and vanished. She reached for the duffel bag. The strap felt familiar under her fingers, weight balanced in a way civilian bags rarely were. She lifted it onto her shoulder. It settled there like it belonged. Sutherland watched her face. "You ready?" Lila's jaw tightened. "No." Sutherland nodded once, accepting it. "Climb in." Lila stepped toward the helicopter door. The major leaned in to help with the bag, then paused, waiting for her permission. Lila climbed in without taking his hand. Inside the cabin was lit dimly equipment, strapped down headsets hanging. The smell of fuel and metal and cold air filled her nose. It was a smell that did not exist in hospitals. It lived in hangars and deserts and nights when sleep never came. She sat and buckled in movements practiced. Sutherland climbed in opposite her. Agent Monroe took a seat near the door headset, already on voice low into a mic coordinating. The pilot's voice crackled through the intercom. "Lifting in 10. The helicopter vibrated as power increased. The rotors roared louder. The rooftop lights blurred slightly through the window as the aircraft shifted. Lila kept her eyes forward. Below, through the glass, she could see the rooftop door. For a moment, it stayed shut. Then it opened. Jack stepped out, breath visible in the cold eyes, scanning until he found her through the helicopter window. He stopped at the edge of the light, too far to approach, too close to ignore. His face was pale. His eyes were wide. His mouth opened, then closed, as if he had words and did not know how to fit them into this. Lila stared back at him. The rotor wash tugged at his scrubs. He raised a hand, slightly uncertain. Lila lifted her own hand, a small motion, not a wave meant for an audience, just a signal meant for one person. Jack's hand rose higher. He nodded once, sharp and firm. The helicopter lifted. The hospital dropped away beneath them, lights shrinking the rooftop, sliding out of frame. The city spread beneath streets and intersections and tiny, moving headlights. Somewhere below, sirens threaded through traffic like needles. Lila's stomach tightened as the ground disappeared. Sutherland watched her. "You did not have to come." Lila's eyes stayed on the window. "Yes, I did." Agent Monroe's voice came through her headset businesslike. "Transport is confirmed. Airfield is clear. Wheels up schedule is holding." Lila listened without responding. Logistics always sounded clean. It was the part of war that pretended the rest could be managed. Sutherland leaned forward slightly. "They asked for you." Lila's jaw clenched. "Who?" Sutherland did not hesitate. "Corporal Jenna Dawson, 23, 8 months in country. Saved 4 Marines before she took shrapnel to the chest. She is critical." Lila closed her eyes for a moment. The name meant nothing and everything. A young medic. A young person with blood on her hands that would never fully wash off. When Lila opened her eyes, the city was still there, but it looked farther away already. The helicopter banked toward the airfield lights, blinking through the dark, the sound of rotors steady and heavy. Lila's fingers tightened around the strap of the duffel bag. Her sleeve rode up a fraction in the vibration, and for a second, the paracord bracelet flashed in the dim cabin light. Faded olive. Frayed end. A bead hidden in the braid. She pulled her sleeve down and kept her face still as the aircraft cut through the night air, carrying her away from fluorescent hum and paperwork lanes and back into the kind of medicine that did not ask permission. The helicopter cut through the night air and the city fell away beneath them, streetlights shrinking into a scatter of sparks. Lila kept one hand on the duffel strap, like the weight could hold her in place. The cabin smelled like fuel and cold metal. The rotor thump pressed against her ribs, steady and heavy, a sound that did not belong to Missouri. When the skids touched down at the airfield, the vibration eased, but her body did not. She climbed out into wind that smelled of jet exhaust and rain-soaked concrete. Floodlights washed everything in harsh white. A transport plane waited on the tarmac with its engines already running, the low roar vibrating through the ground. Colonel Sutherland stepped beside her as they walked toward the ramp. He did not speak until they were close enough to feel the engine heat. "We can get you a bunk," he said. Lila's gaze stayed on the plane. "I won't sleep." Sutherland did not argue. He only nodded as if he had expected it. Agent Monroe moved ahead, phone to her ear, voice clipped and efficient. "Medical load is staged. Clearance is confirmed. Wheels up is on schedule." Lila climbed the ramp into the aircraft. The interior was utilitarian. Webbed seats lined the walls. Cargo netting hung in loose drapes. Medical crates were strapped down in the center, labeled with black marker. Oxygen tanks sat in racks. A flight medic checked a monitor lead with calm hands. Lila took a seat near the front and buckled in without thinking. Muscle memory made even seatbelts feel like ritual. The duffel rested at her feet. She did not open it. She already knew what was inside. She could feel the shape of it through the fabric. Instruments, field packs, dressings. The things she had told herself she would never touch again. Sutherland sat across from her, posture straight, even in a jump seat. The major took a seat farther back. Agent Monroe stood near the ramp until it closed, then sat with her tablet eyes never fully relaxed. The engines rose to a louder pitch. The plane started to move. The vibration traveled up through the seat frame into Lila's spine. For a long time, no one spoke. The cabin noise settled into a steady roar that made conversation feel like work. Lila stared at a small, round window where darkness pressed close. There were no stars, just black, as if the sky had decided not to witness. Sutherland leaned forward slightly, voice raised just enough to be heard. "I know this isn't easy." Lila did not look at him. "You didn't come here to make it easy." Sutherland's eyes stayed on her face. "Why did you ask for full access to your civilian ER when you return?" Lila's jaw tightened. "Because I'm done being punished for staying quiet." Sutherland did not react. He waited patient, as a man used to waiting for answers from people who did not want to give them. Lila swallowed. "They used me like a pair of hands for paperwork. They kept me out of the work because it made them comfortable." Agent Monroe's fingers moved across her tablet, not looking up. "Comfort is a luxury. In both places." Lila's eyes flicked toward her. "And control is an illusion." Monroe finally looked up, gaze sharp. Illusions keep organizations running until they don't. The plane climbed. The pressure in Lila's ears shifted. She swallowed again and pressed her thumb into her wrist beneath her sleeve, feeling the braid of paracord. Sutherland watched the motion. "You still wear it?" Lila did not answer. Sutherland's voice softened. "They asked for you by name. That does not happen often." Lila turned her head slightly. "Who told you my name still carried?" Sutherland's expression tightened in a way that suggested the answer was unpleasant. "A medic. Critical. Chest wound." She heard stories about a captain who could operate under anything. She believed it. "When she started crashing, she asked if we could get you." Lila's throat tightened. "Stories." Sutherland nodded. "Reputation doesn't die easily. Not out there." Lila stared back at the window. In the reflection, she could see her own face pale, under cabin, lighting eyes too steady. For a moment, she saw another reflection layered over it, headlamp glare, canvas walls, dust in the air. She closed her eyes for a single beat and opened them again. Sutherland spoke carefully. "What happened after you left?" Lila let the question hang in the engine noise. Her hands rested on her thighs, fingers still. The stillness looked calm. It was not. "They asked questions," Sutherland continued. "A lot of questions. You were one of the best we had. Then you disappeared. No explanation. No forwarding address." Lila's voice came out low. "I couldn't do it anymore." Sutherland held her gaze. "I know." Lila's eyes sharpened. "Do you?" Sutherland did not flinch. No. Lila's breath caught, then forced itself out. The words rose up from a place she kept locked, because opening it meant drowning. "I watched a 19-year-old kid die in my hands," she said, voice steady only by force. "He kept asking if he was going to be okay. I told him yes. I lied to him. The blood didn't arrive in time. The generator failed twice. The convoy got delayed. He bled out anyway." Sutherland's face softened. He did not look away. Lila stared at her hands as if they belonged to someone else. "I saved more than most surgeons will ever see. That's what people say. They don't say the part where you carry the ones you couldn't save, like weight in your chest that never shifts." The engine roar filled the pause that followed. Agent Monroe's eyes dropped back to her tablet, but her posture changed, shoulders less rigid, as if she had heard this before and hated it every time. Sutherland spoke quietly. "You saved more than you lost." Lila's jaw tightened. "That's not how it feels." Sutherland leaned back in his seat. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you're coming." Lila did not respond. She stared at the window until the darkness blurred into nothing. Time on a transport plane did not move like normal time. It stretched and folded. The cabin stayed cold. The lights stayed dim. The people stayed quiet. A flight medic walked past once and offered Lila water. She took it and drank without tasting. At some point, the plane leveled off. At some point, someone passed out blankets. Lila did not take one. She kept her hands on her knees and breathed in counts when her chest got too tight. In 2, 3, 4. Hold 2, 3, 4. Out 2, 3, 4. When the plane finally touched down, the jolt ran through her bones and grounded her in a way nothing else could. The ramp opened and heat hit like a wall. Dry air, thick with dust, slammed into the cabin and stole breath for a second. The sky outside was pale and washed out the sun already high enough to bleach color. Lila stepped down onto the tarmac. The ground looked the same as she remembered. Concrete, dust, heat shimmer, the smell of jet fuel and sweat. A Humvee waited nearby. Sutherland climbed in first. Lila followed, duffel on her shoulder. Agent Monroe took the front passenger seat, already speaking into a radio. The major drove, eyes scanning, posture alert. They moved through the base, past barriers and guard towers, soldiers walking in formation, rifles slung. The sound of rotors echoed somewhere distant. Lila kept her face still and her gaze forward. The Humvee stopped outside a large tent with a red cross painted on the side. Field hospital. Canvas walls flapped slightly in the hot wind. The ground outside was packed dirt and gravel. A generator rattled nearby, the sound uneven as if it might quit any second. Inside, the smell hit first. blood and antiseptic and smoke. Monitors beeped. Voices shouted. A metallic tang hung in the air. The lighting was harsh and uneven shadows thrown by equipment and moving bodies. A young captain in stained scrubs approached, face drawn tight with exhaustion. He looked at Lila's badge, then at her face, and his eyes widened. "Captain Morgan," he said. Lila nodded once. "Show me." The captain spoke fast as he walked. 6 critical, 2 inbound. We have burns, shrapnel, blast injuries. We are overwhelmed. We have no chest surgeon. We have no one comfortable opening. Lila's grip tightened on the duffel strap. "Where is Dawson?" The captain pointed toward the back. "Bay 4. She's stable for now, but she needs thoracotomy. We tried to temporize. We don't have anyone with the experience." Bay 4 held a young woman on a gurney, pale under harsh light chest, wrapped in bandages already soaked through. Her face was smudged with dust. One eye was swollen nearly shut. A medic stood beside her, holding pressure on a dressing knuckles white. A monitor beeped fast. Heart rate high, blood pressure dropping, oxygen low. Lila stepped in close. Her eyes tracked the monitor numbers and the patient's chest movement. The breathing was shallow. The pulse was racing. The skin was cooling. She turned to the captain. "Get me a surgical kit. Chest tray. Suction. Blood." The captain hesitated. "We're low." Lila's voice stayed flat. "Then we move fast." The captain barked orders. A nurse ran. A medic dragged a tray over. Someone shoved a headlamp into Lila's hand out of habit, then realized there were lights and looked embarrassed. Lila took it anyway. She pulled on gloves. The snap of latex sounded loud in the tent. The medic holding pressure looked at her like she was a lifeline. "She's been asking for you." Lila did not react. She leaned over Dawson, eyes on the chest dressings. She could see the rhythm of blood seeping through stubborn and steady. "Jenna," Lila said quietly, not because she expected the patient to respond, but because names mattered out here. "I'm here." The captain stared at her. "You know her." "I don't," Lila said, and then she nodded toward the tray. Scalpel. The instrument was placed into her hand. The weight felt familiar in a way that made her stomach tighten. Lila made the incision. The first cut was always the line you crossed. After that, you were inside, and there was no room for thoughts about what it meant. There was only anatomy and bleeding and time. She opened the chest wall with controlled speed. A retractor spread ribs. The sound of metal on bone made the nurse flinch. Lila did not. Blood welled. She suctioned and leaned in. The pericardium glistened under light, slick, and tense. She located the bleeding vessel with the calm precision of someone who had done it with less equipment, less light, more noise. "Clamp," she said. A clamp appeared. She placed it, and the bleeding slowed. The monitor beeped, and the numbers steadied slightly. Not good, but less desperate. Lila worked fast. Repair. Suture. Hemostasis. Her hands did not hesitate. The tent around her could have been silent or under fire. The work stayed the same. When she finally stepped back, pulling off her gloves, Dawson's breathing was more even. The medic exhaled a breath he had been holding too long. The captain stared at Lila like she had pulled the sun out of the sky. That was incredible. Lila did not respond. She walked out of the tent, into the shade beside a stacked pallet of supplies, and sat on a crate. The heat pressed down. Dust coated her tongue. Her hands started to shake now that the immediate crisis had eased. She pressed them flat against her thighs until they steadied. Sutherland found her 20 minutes later and sat on a crate beside her without speaking. The bass noise hummed in the background. A helicopter rose somewhere distant. A soldier shouted. A generator stuttered and caught itself again. "She's going to make it," Sutherland said. Lila nodded once. "Good." Sutherland studied her face. "You did good work." Lila's voice was quiet. "It's what I do." Sutherland's gaze softened. "It's what you were built to do." Lila's eyes flicked toward him. "No, sir. It's what I was trained to do." "There's a difference." Sutherland was quiet for a moment. He did not argue. He simply watched the dust move across the ground in a thin wind. Then he spoke again. "Why did you really leave?" Lila stared at her hands. They were clean now, but she could still feel the warmth of blood, the weight of tissue, the pressure of a clamp closing. She did not answer right away. Sutherland waited. Lila's voice came out low, almost a whisper, but steady. Because I started forgetting their faces. Sutherland's brow furrowed. The ones you lost. Lila nodded slowly. I could remember the injuries, the procedures, the outcomes. I could recite them like math. But the faces started to blur, and that scared me more than anything. She swallowed. Her throat felt raw. I didn't want to become someone who could forget, she said. Sutherland nodded slow and heavy. So you left. Lila exhaled once sharp. So I left. A medic ran past them calling for suction inside the tent. Lila stood immediately, body moving before her mind finished processing. She walked back inside without a word. For the next days, time dissolved into work. The tent filled. The tent emptied. The tent filled again. Lila moved between bays with a calm that held the team together. She corrected hand placement with a touch. She adjusted angles with 2 words. She taught without making it feel like teaching, because out here, you learned or you died. One night, the generator sputtered and the lights flickered. The room tensed like prey. Lila snapped her headlamp on without speaking. The beam cut through the dim like a promise. The staff exhaled and kept working. A young medic with blood on his sleeves stared at her hands during a chest repair and whispered, "How are you not shaking?" Lila did not look up. "I am," she said. "I just don't let it drive." Sometimes they saved them. Sometimes they did not. On the second day, a soldier younger than Dawson came in with injuries too massive. Lila took one look and knew the truth. She still worked, still tried, still pressed her hands into the fight until the monitor flatlined anyway. When the room fell silent, Lila stood there for 1 beat too long, headlamp beam fixed on a chest that no longer moved. Her breath caught. The old familiar weight pressed into her sternum. Then she turned away, peeled off her gloves, and walked outside into the dust. Sutherland followed her out and did not speak. He only stood beside her while she stared at the horizon and forced her breathing into counts. In 2, 3, 4. Hold 2, 3, 4. Out 2, 3, 4. By the end of 72 hours, Lila's body felt hollowed out. Exhaustion pulled at her bones. Dust clung to her hairline. Her hands were steady anyway. On the day they left, Dawson was still alive. Still critical, but alive. Lila stood at her bay for a moment, watching the rise and fall of her chest, the beep of the monitor steady enough to be a comfort. The medic who had first held pressure on her dressing stepped up beside Lila, eyes tired. "She asked again," he said softly. "She asked if you'd come back." Lila's throat tightened. She looked at Dawson and then at the medic. "Tell her she did the hard part," Lila said. "Tell her she kept people alive. That's what matters." The medic nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Back on the transport, the heat faded into cabin cold again. Lila sat strapped into a jump seat with her duffel at her feet. Sutherland sat across from her. When they touched down back in the United States and the helicopter carried them towards St. Louis, the city lights below looked different, softer, almost unreal, like a film set. The rooftop helipad came into view and the rotors beat the air into a familiar vibration. The skids touched down on concrete. The sound settled. The door opened. Cold air hit her face. It smelled like winter and the city. Sutherland climbed out first and offered his hand. Lila took it. His grip was firm, professional. "Thank you, Captain," he said. Lila met his eyes. "Thank you, sir." She shifted her duffel strap on her shoulder and stepped toward the rooftop access door. Halfway there, she stopped and turned back. "Sir," she said. Sutherland looked at her. "I'm not coming back," Lila said. "Not to active duty." Sutherland nodded as if he had already known. "I know." He held her gaze. "If you ever change your mind, the doors are open." Lila's mouth tightened into something almost like a smile, small and sad. "I won't." Sutherland did not push. He only nodded again, then stepped back and let her go. Lila walked down the stairwell into the hospital. The fluorescent hum met her on the 3rd floor like it had never left. The hallway smelled of disinfectant and old coffee. Nurses moved between bays. A resident jogged past with a chart in hand. Ordinary chaos. When she reached the ER doors, the room inside was busy, but not burning. No soot, no mass gurneys, just the steady rhythm of a trauma center on a weekday morning. It should have felt easy. It did not. Jack saw her first. He stood near Bay 2 with a tablet in his hand. He looked up, froze, then crossed the distance in 3 quick steps, stopping a few feet away, as if he did not know what distance was allowed. "Lila," he said. She nodded once. "Jack." His face shifted between relief and disbelief. "You're back." "I'm back," she said. He swallowed. "How was it?" Lila held his gaze, then looked past him at the bays. "Hard," she said. "Necessary." Jack nodded, words caught in his throat. Then he found one. "We saved the woman from Bay 5. Lila's eyes sharpened slightly. "Ruptured diaphragm." "Just like you said," Jack replied. "She's in ICU. She made it to OR. Lila exhaled slowly. "Good." They stood for a moment with the ER noise moving around them like water. Somewhere a patient groaned. Somewhere a monitor beeped. Somewhere a nurse laughed quietly at something that did not matter. Jack's eyes searched her face. "They've been asking about you." Lila's mouth tightened. "I know." Jack hesitated. "Sloane's looking for you." Lila nodded. "I know." Grant Harlan stepped out of an elevator at the end of the hall. He stopped when he saw Lila. For a moment, he simply stared. His face looked tired in a way it never had before. Not sleep-tired, ego-tired. Then he stepped aside and held the elevator door open, eyes on the floor. "Dr. Morgan," he said quietly. It was the first time he had said doctor, like it meant something. Lila met his gaze for a brief moment. "Dr. Harlan." She stepped into the elevator. Jack followed at a distance that said he wanted to and did not want to. The doors closed. Grant remained in the hallway, staring at the metal as it sealed shut. On the 4th floor, Lila walked to Sloane's office. The corridor outside it was quiet. She stood at the door for a beat, breathing once, then lifted her hand and knocked. "Come in," Sloane called. Lila opened the door. Sloane stood near the window, with her arms crossed looking out at the city. She turned when Lila entered. The air between them felt heavy, loaded with every order, every assumption, every moment of control. "Dr. Morgan," Sloane said. "Dr. Sloane," Lila replied. They stood in silence. Sloane's jaw tightened once, then released like she was making a decision. "I owe you an apology," Sloane said. Lila did not respond. She waited. Sloane's voice stayed controlled, but there was strain in it. "I didn't see you. I didn't ask. I made assumptions based on nothing but my own arrogance. I was wrong." Lila held her gaze, face calm. Apology accepted. Sloane exhaled once, as if the words cost her. She walked to her desk, picked up a folder, and held it out. "This is a formal recommendation for the Advanced Trauma Surgery Fellowship," Sloane said. "It starts in 6 weeks. If you want it, it's yours." Lila took the folder. The paper felt heavier than it should have. She opened it and scanned the letter. Sloane's signature. The Chief of Surgeries' countersignature. A clean path offered in black ink. Lila closed the folder. "Thank you," she said. Sloane's eyes stayed on her. "I also filed to have your duties reassigned. No more inventory. No more paperwork runs. Full surgical privileges within the resident's scope. Immediate." Lila's gaze held steady. "What changed?" Sloane's mouth tightened. "The fact that you exist." Lila nodded once. "Good." Sloane extended her hand across the desk. The gesture looked unnatural on her, like a tool she did not use often. Lila stared at it for a beat, then shook it. Sloane's grip was firm, cold, professional, a truce more than warmth. "Welcome to the team," Sloane said. Lila released her hand. "I've been here." Sloane's eyes flickered, and for a fraction of a second, something like respect surfaced. Then it was gone. Lila left the office and walked back into the hallway. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and coffee, and something faint and metallic that never fully left. In the surgical prep room later that afternoon, Grant stood at a sink, scrubbing in his eyes on his hands like he did not trust them. Lila restocked a tray nearby, moving instruments into order with quiet precision. Grant cleared his throat. "Dr. Morgan." "Dr. Harlan," Lila said without looking up. Silence stretched between running water and the scrape of a brush on skin. Grant spoke again, voice lower. I was wrong about you. Lila continued arranging clamps. We all make mistakes. Grant's jaw tightened. Not like mine. Lila's hands paused for the first time. She looked at him. Then say it. Grant swallowed. I froze. That day, Bay 3. If you hadn't stepped in, he would have died. Lila's gaze stayed steady. He didn't. Grant's eyes flicked up, raw and unguarded. Because you did. Lila's expression did not soften, but her voice did not cut either. You're still here, she said. That means you get to learn. Grant stared at the water running over his hands. I want to. Lila nodded once. Then listen. Grant exhaled a breath that sounded like relief and fear at the same time. I will. Lila turned back to the tray. Next thoracotomy is yours. Grant's head snapped slightly toward her. What? Lila's voice stayed even. You'll do it. I'll supervise. Grant's throat bobbed. He nodded slowly, not confident but willing. In the resident lounge the next morning, the mood had changed. The whispers were still there, but they carried less sharpness. Curiosity mixed with respect. A few residents looked up when Lila entered and held her gaze instead of looking away. One of them stood young and nervous, hands twisting the edge of a notebook. Dr. Morgan, he said. Would you show us some techniques? We heard. Lila stopped and looked at him, then at the others. Their faces were eager, not hungry for gossip, hungry for skill. She nodded once. Skills lab, she said. 6 a.m. A ripple of surprise moved through them. Then excitement. Lila walked out before they could thank her. At 6 in the morning, the training room smelled of plastic and antiseptic. 8 residents sat in a row, eyes forward. A simulation torso lay on the table. Instruments were arranged in clean lines. Lila stood at the front with a scalpel in her hand. The room quieted without her asking. The first thing you learn in trauma, she said, voice calm, is that nothing goes according to plan. She made an incision in the simulation skin, clean and precise. The second thing she continued is that your hands can't wait for your feelings to catch up. A resident raised a hand, then lowered it again, unsure. Lila looked at him. Ask. He swallowed. How do you stay calm? Lila paused. The question hung in the air. She set the scalpel down on the tray. I don't, she said. I do the work anyway. The room stayed silent. They leaned in, not because she demanded it, but because the truth sounded like something they could use. She picked the scalpel back up and continued. Show me your grip. She moved down the line, adjusting a hand placement, correcting posture, speaking in short sentences that carried weight. She did not lecture. She demonstrated. She made them repeat until their fingers obeyed. In the ER weeks later, a new rhythm started to take hold. Clear rolls, clear calls. Crash carts stalked the same way every time. A rapid response checklist taped inside drawer lids. The first 30 seconds of a trauma became a practiced sequence instead of a scramble. One night, an ambulance call came in for a high-speed rollover. The bay filled with motion. The patient arrived unconscious, airway-threatened blood pressure unstable. Grant took the lead. Lila stood behind him, hands at her sides, eyes on the monitor, not interfering. Grant called out assignments in a voice that was steady enough to be believed. Airway here. 2 large bore lines. Pelvic binder. Fast scan, now. His hands moved, his angle was right, his grip was controlled. When the monitor dipped, he did not freeze. He adjusted. He listened to Jack's numbers. He made decisions fast enough to matter. Lila watched him and felt something shift in her chest that was not pride and not relief. It was simply recognition. A change made real. Later in the cafeteria at noon, Lila sat at the same corner table, but this time her tray had food she actually ate. Not much. Enough. Jack sat down across from her without asking. His coffee was hot. He did not touch it right away. Mind if I join? He asked anyway. Go ahead, Lila said. They ate in silence for a moment. The cafeteria noise moved around them like a tide. Nurses laughed quietly at another table. A resident complained about pager batteries. Ordinary life. Jack studied her face. You know you're a legend now. Lila smirked small. I'm not. Jack's eyes held hers. They've been calling you the ghost. Lila let out a quiet breath that was almost a laugh. That's ridiculous. Jack's mouth tugged up. It fits. Lila took another bite of food. She chewed slowly. She swallowed. It doesn't, she said. Jack did not argue. He watched her eat like it mattered. That evening, Lila stood on the rooftop as the sun lowered behind the city skyline. Orange and pink light spilled across the concrete. The air was cold enough to sting her lungs in a clean way. Below St. Louis hummed. Sirens rose and fell in the distance like a familiar language. Jack stood beside her, hands in his pockets, shoulders relaxed for the first time in weeks. They watched the city without speaking. After a while, Jack broke the silence. Do you ever think about going back? Lila's fingers touched the paracord bracelet at her wrist. Faded olive. Frayed end. A bead hidden in the braid. She stared at the skyline. No. Jack glanced at her. Not even part-time. Not even if they ask again. Lila's voice stayed calm. This is where I'm supposed to be. Jack's brow furrowed slightly. Why? Lila inhaled cold air and let it out slowly. Because here, she said, I can save lives without losing pieces of myself. Jack nodded once, understanding more than he said. A phone buzzed in Lila's pocket. She pulled it out and looked at the screen. A message from Sutherland. Heard about the new protocol. Proud of you. Lila stared at it for a beat. Then her thumb moved. Thank you, sir. She put the phone away. Jack watched her. He still calls you captain. Lila's mouth tightened into a small smile that did not carry joy, only history. He always will. They stood in silence again until the sun slipped lower and the city lights began to flicker on, one by one, faint stars against winter dusk. When Lila finally turned toward the rooftop door, she did not hesitate. She walked back down into the fluorescent hum, not to hide, not to disappear, but to work, because that was what her hands knew and what her mind could now tolerate. Outside, the air stayed cold and the city kept moving. Her phone buzzed again as she reached the ground floor exit. This time, it was Jack. Drink tomorrow after shift. Lila stared at the message and felt the smallest shift in her chest, like a knot loosening. Sure, she typed back. She stepped out into the night air and breathed it in. Stars were barely visible through city light, but they were there if you looked hard enough. Lila walked toward the street with her shoulders squared, not running, not hiding, moving forward one step at a time, while the city hummed around her.